There was no surprise in how President Trump justified his declaration.
We're talking about an invasion of our country with drugs, with human traffickers, with all types of criminals and gangs.
Never mind that illegal border crossings have overall been on the decline, Trump declared a national emergency, sidestepping Congress to free up $8 billion to build a wall that candidate Trump promised Mexico would pay for.
It's a great thing to do.
But was declaring a national emergency actually necessary? Not really, said Trump himself.
I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this.
A line seized upon by California's Attorney General as he announced a lawsuit to stop the wall being built.
As the president said himself, he didn't have to do this. There's no emergency here for the nation.
I expect that we'll see that quote in all of the briefs that are filed against him.
And those lawsuits could mean months, maybe years, before any ground is broken as the courts consider
whether the president is trying to do an end around Congress's exclusive authority over the purse. And as we know, the only real reason why he's just sort of unilaterally declared an emergency is because he couldn't get Congress to agree to fund the wall.
The president seems ready for the fight.
And we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court.
House Democrats have already launched their own investigation, accusing President Trump of a reckless disregard for the Constitution. So what's the endgame here? Well, even though he knows any construction will be delayed and that he might not win in the courts, declaring a national emergency allows President Trump to tell his base that he did everything he could to fulfill a campaign promise. That's an important message going into 2020. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
The term national emergency might make you think presidents use the extraordinary power for events happening in the United States, but it turns out most of the time that's not the case. Most have actually been about foreign policy, sanctioning specific governments or targeting the spread of weapons of mass destruction. In fact, of the last 59 national emergencies declared before today, just 3 had to do with emergencies in the U.S., relaxing certain requirements during the H1N1 flu epidemic, after Hurricane Katrina, and in the wake of 9/11, assuming broad powers, including being able to redirect funding for military construction, similar to what Trump hopes to do now, but for an emergency a lot different than 9/11. Well, for more on the political context for the U.S. president, let's turn to Keith Bogue in Washington. And Keith, let's begin with how Trump got to this point.
Well, he got here by promising something he had no idea how to deliver. Remember, he said he was going to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. It was a great line for campaign rallies because it was such a vivid image to remind his base that he stood for keeping people they don't like out of the country. The trouble is that people on the right, such as Ann Coulter, have built careers on policing the promises politicians make about immigration and the border. So they love Trump for what he promised to do, but are unforgiving when he fails to do it. And Trump apparently cares a lot about what they think. Today, he tried to look as though he's still their champion, still fighting the fight. But Coulter said today, the real national emergency in America is that the president is an idiot. So that's what he got for his efforts.
So we've heard that the fate of this wall is far from certain. How does this play out for him?
Well, it looks like all this is going to be tied up in the courts until after the 2020 election. So you see Trump today preparing his arguments for the campaign about how none of it's really his fault. He blamed the Republican leadership for not moving ahead with the wall in the first days of his presidency, and he was rehearsing his complaints against the courts if they get in his way now. And that's likely to work with his base. I mean, if he believes he could, as he said, shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't cost him a single vote, he surely believes he can get away with blaming someone else for not keeping his border wall promise. But it might cost him among the reluctant Trump voters he got in 2016, not because they care about the wall, but because they don't. They've seen the president waste time, money, and even shut down the government for it and ultimately fail. And that looks like incompetence.
Thank you, Keith. If Trump gets the $8 billion he's looking for through the emergency declaration, it's expected to pay for 376 kilometers of fencing. That is less than a quarter of what he originally said he wanted to build.